it's really lovely for someone like me who lives in this yoga world and go, well, you should meditate twice a day for 20 minutes, and then you should do a yoga practice for, 45 to 90 minutes every single day. And then you should eat vegan, and you should only eat at whatever time when the moon is waning and the planets aren't in retrograde and the star, like, come on, let's live in the real world where all that stuff is wonderful. But, for a real person in a real, say, corporate job or just a real job, it doesn't work. So, take the things that you can do, start off slowly and go from there.
I'm Casey Main, author, writer, and party girl turned spiritual junkie. And I'm dedicated to helping you better understand the most important and most complicated relationship you'll ever be in, the one you have with yourself. It's the only relationship that you're in for the entirety of your time here, and it affects every single aspect of your life. Yet it is the one most often overlooked. This podcast is here to help you explore that relationship, get to know yourself so you can accept yourself, heal yourself, and become a better version of yourself. So let's get to it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Better You podcast. I am your host, Casey Main. As always, thank you so much for being here. If you're new, welcome to the show. If you've been following for a while, thank you so much for coming back. This is the second to last new episode of this calendar year. So this is a new episode. We're going to have a new episode next week. And then in the month of December, I'm going to air like the best of reruns from the podcast so far. And that is really just to give myself a little bit of time off so that I can go into major planning mode for 2021. If you've been listening for a while, then you've heard me mention this before, but I'm going to be much more intentional about the order of the topics that we address and the types of guests we have on the podcast. So I make sure that I'm really addressing all different aspects and angles of our relationship with ourselves, because there's a lot that goes into it. It's a very complicated relationship, and there's the mental component, the emotional component, science, like we can get into science from like a neurological perspective to physical, nutrition, exercise, that kind of stuff. Then there's the spiritual element. And so there's a lot. And I want to make sure that I'm kind of hitting every angle frequently so that topics stay just really interesting and it's kind of new and refreshing every week, because I want to make sure that you guys are coming back and then just really enjoying the show, because that is why I am doing it. Although I'm partly doing it for myself. I told next week's guest that these podcast conversations are kind of like my own version of therapy. But really, if it is helping any of you, like even just like one person out there, then it's worth it for me. And it really is my purpose in doing this podcast. And I mean, it's a lot of time. It's much more time consuming than I was expecting it to be when I first got into it. But, I found that like when I have those moments of doubt and kind of being like, is this something I should really be spending this much time doing? Like, should I just kind of take a break from it and focus on other type of stuff? That's when I usually hear from one of you and you reach out and, tell me that you really enjoyed a certain episode or the podcast in general. And honestly, it's the timing of those messages is what keeps me going. Because whenever I have those moments of doubt, and it happened just the other week, and then I got this really great voice message from a listener about how it's just, she looks forward to it every week and it's kind of become her happy time and she's really enjoying the episodes. And that just, it really means the world to me. So if you all enjoy an episode or you've been liking the show, like please do not hesitate to reach out. Like it has a big impact on me personally and helps to keep me inspired and energized to keep going with the show. So that's the plan for December, to air some reruns. And then actually, I forgot, but I just remembered this. The very last episode of the year, I can't remember what day that falls on. I want to say the Tuesday is like December 29th. I don't have a calendar in front of me. I'm going to do a life lessons episode, which I did last year. So if you go back into the podcast archives, you'll see I did 20 life lessons for 2020. And it was just kind of a review of some of the major things I kind of thought about or analyzed or were inspired by throughout the year. So I'm going to do the same thing at the end of this year. I guess I'll do 21 lessons. So I'll do 21 lessons for 2021. So yeah, we'll do 4 rerun episodes in December. And then the very last one will be a solo episode where I will share, I guess, just kind of like the best of thoughts from the past year. So that is the plan to round out 2020 and then start 2021. Okay, so as far as today's episode, I do want to say before we get into it that there's been several guests on the podcast, especially this past year, and today's guest is the same, and this is true of my life as well, that, we used to have these corporate world jobs and then we've left them. And I want to be clear that I'm not preaching or think that everyone should leave their job and go start their own thing. It's right for some people. It's not right for some people. And so I don't want the fact that there's been several of these guests who have this story, which is similar to my story, for that to be construed as, me being this cheerleader for leaving your job. I don't think that's right for everyone, but I do believe that it's possible to find happiness and fulfillment in any kind of job. So what I guess I am preaching, like always, is that you spend some time in self-reflection, self-awareness, and then just be brutally honest with yourself, especially if you're not happy or feel inspired or fulfilled in your current job. Like, just spend some time to think about it, really dig into it and figure out, like, what is the reason? Is it because it's not the right job for you, or is it a matter of your mindset towards the job? I think I've said in previous episodes, I don't even believe that everybody needs to have a day job that is in line with, their passion or their purpose. Like, maybe your day job is just something that affords you the ability to do things that fall within your passion or your purpose. And maybe that's some kind of a side hustle. Maybe it's just a hobby. Maybe it's just something you enjoy doing. So I think I want everyone to be happy and to find happiness, and that can take many different forms. And sometimes it's changes on the outside. More often than not, it's changes on the inside. And then a lot of times it's a combination. So again, as you're listening to this episode, don't think that you necessarily have to leave your job, but more, and we kind of talk about this in the episode, think about what role your job is playing in your life. What role do you want it to play in your life? Make sure that feels right to you, and then really accept that and be okay with that, even if it's different than kind of the societal norm, because I think that's where a lot of us get tripped up, is kind of comparing ourselves or thinking, all the should or shouldn'ts, and we do that to just compare ourselves to others or whatever is considered normal. So my whole thing is find your own normal. Okay, so then real quick, next week on the show, we have a really cool guest. Her name is Dr. Ashley Dial. She is a psychologist and has a horse ranch where she does equine therapy. So it's therapy with horses. And it is just such an interesting conversation. And she's actually not that far from me. She's about a little under an hour south. So I was able to drive down there. We did the interview in person, sitting outside. So the audio might not be fantastic, but you'll get to hear nature and birds in the background. And we're just on this beautiful piece of property with 25 horses just roaming around. And it was just such an interesting conversation that involves horses and their role in therapy in general, but really more even bigger than that in terms of how the different ways that we can work on ourselves, and particularly the role that judgment or fear of judgment can play in our self-work. And so if you've been averse to going to see a therapist, which I've never even done, is the reason you're not open to it because of that other human element, opening up to another person and potentially thinking that they might judge you or whatever. And so it was just interesting because like a horse isn't going to do that. Like they're going to reflect back to you, like they're going to pick up on your energy and what you've got going on and kind of reflect that back to you, but like they're not going to judge you. So there's like a safety element in there that I had never really thought of before. So that is a really cool episode. If you're not already subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss next week's episode. And then I also wanted to share a couple previous episodes, as I often do, that tie into some of the things we talk about today, in case you want to go further into some of those concepts. So the first one is episode 65, The Great Divide, Equally Splitting Housework and Childcare with Francine Deutsch. And this is an interesting one. It might be a triggering one for some people. It was kind of a difficult conversation for me, to be completely honest. She wrote this book about equally splitting housework and childcare and how in most couples it is not an equal split. And we talk about that today, how especially a lot of the childcare responsibilities typically fall on the mother in the relationship. And it's an interesting perspective, especially if you are a parent. So listen to that one. Then also episode 63, Eastern Philosophy and Living Meditation for Your Life with Dr. Janelle Kim. There's a similar concept there with that meditation doesn't necessarily have to look like, oh, you're finding 10, 20, 30 minutes to sit alone, quiet in a room in lotus position with your palms up. Like you can kind of just meditate throughout the day in the form of more awareness, conscious choices, intentional choices. So we talk a lot in this episode about juggling everything and finding balance and finding the time for yourself and all that stuff. And so Dr. Janelle Kim has a great perspective, and she calls it living meditation, which is really more almost like being in like a constant meditative state throughout your day, which is really just more like awareness and intentional choices. And then also episode 39, Yogic Principles for Life and a Pandemic with Ashton August, because we do talk about yoga today, and Ashton is the founder of the site Yogi Approved. So it is, it's like an online magazine, and then also a lot of online yoga classes. And then you can go way back into episode 9, How to Ease the Stress of Self-Care with Megan Weigel. So that's one of the beginning episodes. And Megan is another guest that is local, so I was able to just go and talk to her in her office. But she's got a great perspective on self-care, and particularly not allowing it to stress you out. And if it gets to a point where you're stressing out about doing the things that are supposed to de-stress you, then it's like defeating the purpose. So those are a couple previous episodes. If you haven't already listened to them and you enjoy today's conversation, check them out. They're all kind of similar and just go a little bit deeper in some of the things that we talk about today. So, all right, let's talk about today's episode and today's guest. Casey Castro is a mother of 4, yogi, and has a passion for helping others to grow and reach their potential. Casey has been a yoga practitioner for over 20 years when a debilitating knee injury left her unable to continue with ballet and martial arts. Since then, her practice has evolved with her life. She says, "Moving my body has always been a priority, and much like the seasons, my practice changes as my life changes. When I teach yoga, I bring a frankness to it. I make it real. I make it accessible. We can't all be Instagram yogis." This mentality is what drives Sydney Yoga Collective and the Prenatal Yoga Studio to be some of the most popular studios for real people wearing real clothes that show up to feel good. And in this episode, we discuss her story of deciding to leave her high-powered corporate sales job to become a full-time mother and yogi, the pressure mothers feel to excel and stay relevant in the corporate world, whether or not it really is possible to balance a career and parenting, the importance of figuring out what you really want and then accepting that, the role meditation and yoga can play in helping you find clarity in what really matters to you, how to find the time to fit meditation into your busy life, the power of redefining what meditation, yoga, or different acts of self-care look like for you, how little things as simple as smiling or breathing can bring you back into the present moment, and finally, a new way to see yoga and how to fit it into your life. I think this is a really refreshing conversation, very real. Plus, she has an amazing Australian accent. You guys are going to love this one. So, we're going to go ahead and jump into this conversation with another Casey. Okay, so I always like to start with just a little bit of the backstory of the guest. So if you could kind of share with us a little bit of your story and like how you got into the work that you're currently doing.
Absolutely. So I came from a corporate background where I worked in a high pressure sales role for around probably 13 to 15 years. And I had always done yoga and, mindfulness to some sort of extent for probably, over 20 years. And I think when I was pregnant with my third child, I woke up one day and went, I don't really like what I'm doing. And, being in a high pressure sales role, I felt like it just wasn't, it was very disingenuous to what I wanted. And it was, this constant pressure to do more, to sell more, to make more money for the company. And I remember just going into work one day and thinking, yeah, I don't think I want to do this. And I because I was pregnant, I had the luxury of leaving to go on maternity leave, and I just never went back. I went and discovered the world of yoga as a full-time thing. And so I went from, having a regular yoga practice and juggling family to just becoming this full-time yogi and opening up my own yoga studio and doing all the yoga things. And I, hand on heart, I've never been happier. I don't have to, in the wonderful scheme, I don't have to wear these high heels anymore. I don't have to wear suits. I don't have to wear makeup. I don't even have to wash my hair that regularly. And it's really nice because, I get to be barefoot most of the time and connect with people on a human level as opposed to in this superficial world of bullshit, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay. So I love that. And it seems so simple. Like, oh, I just realized I don't want to do this anymore. And so I didn't return. But I know for a lot of people, it's not simple. Was it as simple as it sounds for you? Or were there things that like led up to that? Like, how long had you been thinking about it? What were you kind of grappling with? Like, how did you actually come to that decision?
Yeah. Okay. So it definitely wasn't as simple as I just made that sound. I hadn't been happy in my corporate life for a little while, and I worked for these billion-dollar companies, and I had found myself jumping, from company to company over that period that I worked in corporate, and in hindsight, I was really looking for just a deeper level of something, and what it was is it took the death of my father for me to realize that this is not okay. And at the time my boss was unsympathetic that I had to have time off after he died. And it was, no, we have this visitor coming out, from head office, and we've got this sales conference, and we've got this, and we've got this. And I just thought to myself, I'm just a cog in the machine. And if I'm just replaceable. They don't actually care about me as a person. Mm-hmm. So, given that I'd worked for such a long time, I had some leave accrued, and in Australia you get paid maternity leave, so it was just a really good time for me to do that. So taking that time off, having the baby, getting paid for it, and then it was a matter of just assessing. And I said to my husband, I said, well, I don't want to go back. What can we do? And I was fortunate because fortunate, unfortunate, that I had some money come in from inheritance from the passing of my dad, and that sort of kickstarted me into going, yep, I'm doing this. I don't want to go back to that. And it was a challenge, and it was a struggle, and financially we were worse off for a little while there. But yeah, I mean, the benefits of feeling better and mentally, physically, and all of those other things, outweigh, the money side of things, a millionfold. And I wouldn't go back in a heartbeat. You couldn't pay me to.
So when you had your first child, you were in that really competitive corporate world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had my first one. I went back to work after 3 months, which is unheard of. So in Australia, normally, women take a year, sometimes 2 years off to have
Wow.
children. Yeah. So we're, none of this sort of 2 week or 4 week business. And it's actually illegal for women to go back to work less than 6 weeks after giving birth.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so it's pretty great here. We've got it pretty good, and companies usually will pay you for most of that maternity leave period, and then government pays you as well. So there's a lot of people with your best interest there. So I went back to work when the first one was 3 months old, and that sort of for me became this, I have to work really hard. I don't want to lose my position, and I'm on this corporate ladder to to do really well, and I just have to keep going, and I can't afford to take that extra time off because I don't want to lose my place on that ladder. And that just became what happened. I just continued and continued and continued, and and then my second child, I remember I interviewed for another company when I was 9 months pregnant, and I waddled into this interview, and she, the woman that interviewed me and the HR person, they thought it was hilarious because they didn't know that I was pregnant, and in walks this woman, and they were like, okay, well, we kind of need someone to start pretty quickly. And they basically said, we're not willing to hold this for too long because, given obviously what's about to happen, how committed can you be? And, at the time, again, because I was so blinded by this corporate ladder that I was on, I was like, yep, no, I'm committed. I'll be here. It'll be great. And I said, give me 6 weeks. So I did. I had my baby, and 6 weeks later, I had started in this new role at a new company. And it was just insane because I remember having to, express pump in the first aid room down in the, in the basement of the building, and trying to pump, and then also doing emails at the same time, and then running back upstairs and having a meeting, and then having to pump again. And because I was still freshly having just given birth, it was just this really strange kind of twilight zone that I worked in for such a long time. And then it really took, that sort of life change with my dad to wake up and go, what the hell are you doing? I have these 2 little kids at home and a third one on the way. And, I didn't have that quality of life that, that I had wanted for so long.
You said something about, kind of that pressure to get back to work of like that you didn't want to lose your place on the ladder. And I think that's a really common mindset and kind of driving force of the stress associated with working and being a parent. Like, why do you think that is? Like, are we making jobs part of our identity? Are we like attaching them to self-worth, or do we think it's a timing thing? Like we're in the prime of our career and we can't afford to slow down, or like, why do we have all that pressure to get back to work and like not lose our spot?
It's a very real thing. And I think that, especially as women, we have children, but then we go to work and we pretend like we don't have children because,
Mhm.
we have to have the meetings, we have to look a certain way, we have to do a certain thing. We don't talk about the kids. And then, we leave work and then we're mother or wife or whatever. And, it's this constant balancing act when in fact it can be quite detrimental. And I think that, there is that pressure, real or imagined, because if you look around, there's people that don't have children. And then it's generally the women, not to sound old fashioned, but it's generally the women that are the primary carers for the children. So we're the ones that will usually go, okay, well, I'll come back on a part-time basis, or I'll stay at home with the kids. And it's usually the men that then continue in those roles, you know, without these big breaks in their career of time, because they, you know, in theory don't need to have those breaks of time when a new baby comes, because it is that usually that woman that has to, you know, breastfeed and look after that baby. And, you know, I know for me, I had women in my team that were so hungry for success that they, you know, they didn't want children. They didn't want children to interfere with their career. And, you know, that for me was, well, I was on this trajectory to do really well and to go quite far. And then I had these, you know, these people biting at my heels wanting my job. So that's why. And I think it's a very real thing, because you go, well, if I take too much time, then I become irrelevant. And in these fast moving corporate environments, you know, it can happen very, very quickly. And I can count, you know, a number of women that have had maternity leave for 1 year, and they come back and their job doesn't exist, and they have to go into some other role which is subpar to what they were, and then they've lost that trajectory that they were on. So it's a very real thing, especially for women. I don't think men experience this as much, but you know, for us, I think it's, you kind of have to work out, well, what it is that you want and how you want to be. And if you know, of course, there's those unicorn companies or corporations that are incredible, and you know, this sort of stuff doesn't exist. But for the most part, this is very real, and it happens, you know, in more places than people would probably admit to.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I am not a mother, so I do not know the firsthand experience, but probably my closest view of it is with my sister, who now has 3 children, and she has a very big, high power job with a very large bank here in the United States. And it's been interesting and sometimes heartbreaking to watch her try and balance the two. And it's almost like, and now I'm speaking for her, but it's almost like she feels guilty no matter what, because if she's at work, and maybe she's staying late to do something, then she feels guilty she's not at home. If she's at home, she feels guilty that she's not responding to emails or didn't get, you know, whatever done. It's like, from my point of view, it looks like she's in like this lose-lose mental situation. Yet then there's all this like society messaging out there, like, oh, like you really can't, you can have it all. Like you can do both. You can have the career and the kids and the great relationship and the yoga practice or the fitness routine. And like, I question if that actually is possible.
Yeah, I don't believe it is. I think if you go down that path and you can have all the support around you, you know, you can hire nannies, you can hire a cleaner, you can hire a cook, you can have, you know, the most supportive partner in the world, but at the end of the day, something is going to give, and you can't be everything to everyone. And that's what I found. That's what I started to struggle with, especially, you know, as my eldest son, you know, he was in kindergarten and he'd started big school. So it was very exciting. And it went from being, I had them in long daycare hours, which was, you know, you could drop off as early as 6 or 6:30 a.m. and you could pick them up at 6 p.m. So that worked really well. You just drop the kids off, you go to work for, you know, however many hours that you're there, and then you pick them up as late as possible. And you come home, you bath them, you put them to bed, then you start again. Then you have school, and school finishes at 3 p.m. So then it was like, well, how do I pick these kids up? What the hell do I do? Oh my God. And you know, the school didn't open until 8:30. So it then became, how then do I fit my corporate working hours into this shorter day, as well as then managing my child who's now exhausted from, you know, learning all day as opposed to playing all day. And then I remember putting him into this aftercare program in the school in the afternoon. And then he was falling asleep in the classroom and falling asleep in aftercare. And he was just miserable. And, you know, this is what I'm saying, like something's going to give, because you can't just continue on that trajectory. So either, you know, you realize that it's the kids that you have to then give up, or it's the job you have to give up. I mean, not give up the kids, but, you know, you have to, you know, go back to them. You know, please don't give up your kids. But, but it is, or you then have some sort of nervous breakdown, and then it's you that's broken. So,
Mm-hmm.
You have to, and, to say, you can have it all. You can have the high-powered career. You can have the kids, the family, the partner, like you said, the fitness regime, the health, this. I mean, that's just bullshit. You can't have all of it at once. There has to be a balance and a harmony. And, I think that realistically, you have to just kind of go, okay, when you're at work, you're at work. When you're at home, you're at home. And you can't then bring the work home. And just, I find that I work with a lot of private clients who do work in corporate environments, and that's the biggest challenge for them is like, well, I have this really important career and I'm on emails 24/7, and thanks so much smartphones, because we're
Yeah.
constantly plugged in and connected. And what I work with them on is going, set your boundaries with your boss so that you're not then getting emails. You're not feeling like you have to respond to emails at 6, 7, 8, 10 p.m., 6 a.m., whatever. Have those really frank conversations with people and say, hey, these are my working hours. Outside of this, I have another life, which is your family life. And if it's not family, then it's, it's your exercise or your health or whatever. As long as you set those boundaries with people early on, then that's an easier way to then find that balance. Because otherwise, if we're pulled in too many directions, then eventually something's going to give.
I totally agree, but I think those boundaries can be really hard for people to
Mm,
set because of, like you said earlier, there's these other women, men, whatever, people kind of chomping at the bit to maybe take your position
mm,
or move up the ladder or whatever it may be. And so it's like this overall pressure to excel. And for some reason, that like response time and being available all the time and the in work early and staying work late, like for whatever reason we have that tied to like this concept of excelling at work.
yeah, yeah. It's I was just remembering there's a show, and I think it's a Canadian show. It's called Working Moms, and it it depicts this brilliantly because the main character in it, she goes back to work and she has her own agency, and she's on the phone in her office breastfeeding at the same time, and then the kid starts vomiting or something, and then she's trying to take a meeting, and it's just everything implodes all at once.
Hmm.
And I think that it's so difficult to set those boundaries sometimes, but it also comes down to, well, you kind of have to go, look, what do you actually want? And that's a really hard question for people to ask themselves, because, like, do you want to be that person that's home all the time and spends quality time with family or partner, or do you want to be that person that doesn't necessarily spend as much time with that family and is happy for, childcare or a nanny or someone else to then be looking after the children while you focus on this? And then how long are you going to give for that? Because I speak to women, and I work with women a lot. I speak to women who, have maybe just, hit their 50s, and they turn around and they say, they're either in two schools of thought. They're either, happy that they went down this career path, and maybe they haven't had children and they've just had this incredible career and they're happy, but then they might have some ounce of, oh, I didn't have children, I missed that opportunity. And then you have women who go, well, yeah, I'm highly successful, I've had an amazing career, but I missed out on all this stuff with my kids, and now that I'm ready to have a relationship with my kids, they don't want to really have that with me. So then they feel maybe that resentment. And then you have these women who go, I like, similar to myself, like, oh, I checked out of that corporate job at some point, and now I have a better relationship with my kids, and maybe they're happier or maybe they're not. So I think it kind of, you just kind of have to ask yourself those hard questions and go, what do I want and why am I doing this? Because at the end of the day, we only have one life. We only have one chance to live it. And do you want to, have a family? Do you want to have moments with the children? Do you want to see them in school plays? Do you want to, do the school pickup, drop off, or or do you want to do the other stuff? And it's fine either way. But I think people need to sit with what it is that they really want, and be comfortable in their decision and go, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, I guess like ultimately it comes down to one, asking yourself that hard question and answering it in an honest way with yourself,
Mm.
and then just accepting that and like being okay
Yeah.
with, okay, this is my mindset towards my job, and this is the trade-offs I'm willing to make with my time, and I'm okay with that. But I don't know, we have like a really hard time with that too. And I guess because we we judge ourselves and we compare ourselves to other people and just all the reasons we create the negative self-talk of how we're not doing it quote unquote correctly.
I mean, that's so true because, and social media is a huge part of this. I mean, you just go onto Instagram and you can see all these perfect people with their perfect lives. Uh, and I think that
Yep.
we can't all be these Instagram people because it doesn't exist. And those people, are just showing you one side of it. And I think that's a really important thing to remember is that not everyone, like, I mean, no one has it all together. Everyone's just kind of making it up as they go along and faking it most of the time and hoping for the best, and like you said, you have to be really comfortable with your decisions and stand by them. And, something that I do a lot with is I teach my clients to meditate. And when you sit and you meditate on something and can be really hippy dippy, but, you know, it really just helps you kind of sift through the stuff. And
Hmm.
I know when I do my meditation, I get so much more clarity from it. And even though I run a yoga studio and I run another a few different businesses yoga related, it's still constant for me. I get emails constantly, and I have to sit there sometimes and go, okay, I don't want to just get bogged down by all the emails and all the stuff. What do I actually need to focus and prioritize on? And through meditation, that gives me that clarity to do that. And it also, because you're meditating for yourself, you then find that the answers, the answer's already within you.
Hmm.
It is in you. And I know
It
that's
is.
a
Yeah.
cliche thing to say, but you already know the answer for yourself. And sometimes meditating or through yoga, you find these things and you think, wow, that is something. Maybe you thought that that's the life that you wanted, 15 years ago, you thought about that. And then you circle back to things and you go, well, that's actually is still what I want. How do I then come back to this? Or how do I then find this new thing? And through these modalities, you can find so much more clarity and you find peace with them. And that's a really beautiful thing about yoga and about meditation is that it gives you that clarity of mind, not just, obviously you get the beautiful body benefits as well, but, you get that really strong clarity within yourself to know, okay, I'm on this path and I'm happy with this path. I've set the boundaries and this is where I'm going. And then when you are consistent with your practices, then you'll find that the other stuff won't really matter. And it won't matter that you have people, saying, oh, you should do this or you should do that, or Instagram or Facebook is telling you these things. It's like, well, actually, no, I'm pretty comfortable with where I'm going. And I think that's the hard part of the journey is getting that clarity and then sticking with it sometimes.
I totally agree. And as, however hippy dippy it sounds, I totally agree. Like we have the answers within us. We don't find that quiet time for them to surface. And then sometimes then we don't listen to them because sometimes
Mm.
they involve making big decisions or big changes. And it's all a process, and you know, it's difficult, but I think like for a lot of people it's difficult, even for myself, like it's difficult to even then find the time to have a consistent meditation practice. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like as we were talking about before, you have these people, especially who are parents and they're juggling work and spending time with their children, which is what we've primarily spoken about. But then there's also finding time to be with your partner. And then maybe you do have some kind of a physical exercise routine, which just helps with stress level. And so it's like trying to fit it all in a day, finding time to meditate, taking care of your family, being with your family, quality time with your partner, work, children, like all of it. I don't know. It's just, I think that's the biggest struggle for people is even finding the time to do the things that will help them gain the clarity on how to spend their time.
Yeah, I agree. And I see it a lot because when we talk about this balance and finding the time to do all the things, A-type personalities will go, all right, well, I'll schedule in and I'll wake up at 5 a.m. and I'll do this and I'll do that and then I'll do this, then, and it's this checklist of all the things that they have to do. And I mean, that's fine for some people, but again, you're still lending yourself to this schedule and this sort of really, it can then move from being something that you're doing for yourself to, oh, it's just a laundry list of things that I have to do, and it loses I guess, its purpose a little bit. So, something that I do tell my students and my clients that I work with is, find the time where you can, so I try to meditate every day. Do I actually meditate every day? No, I don't have the time to meditate every day. And, I would love to meditate for 20 minutes twice a day and, live in the clouds. But, I live in reality. I have 4 children. I have businesses. I have a husband. I have all this stuff. And, you have to just find that balance. So if that means when you're first starting to try to implement some sort of self-care, or coming back to these things that, we should all be doing in a perfect world, it's start small, and if that means, okay, in 10 minutes between dropping off the children and before going into the office, you sit in your car and you meditate for 10 minutes, then do that. You don't have to have this, this setup that you see on social media where, you've got this beautiful cushion and, the lights at the perfect temperature and you've got music. Like, who cares? Sit in the car, close your eyes, take your shoes off for a second and just do it. And I think that's where we tend to find that if you're too focused on what it should be, then you actually miss what you actually could be doing. And meditation is super easy. You can do it anyway. You can do it on public transport, on your way to work. I mean, if anyone's going to work anymore. And it's, I don't know what anyone's doing, but that, in the whole work from home thing, it makes it just that much harder as well, because you're literally rolling out of bed and then you're rolling onto your computer and you're at home, and that can be quite detrimental as well. So it's just making the time where you can. For me, I teach a lot of yoga. Do I get to do a lot of yoga? No, I don't. I'm lucky if I can do yoga for myself maybe once or twice a week. But it's in those moments that I then get the benefit. And I think to myself, oh God, I should do this every day. I should wake up at 5 o'clock every day and do this. But in reality, that's not going to happen. I sometimes have too many glasses of wine at night, and then I don't want to wake up early in the morning to do anything. So it's being realistic about things. And, sometimes I'd rather sit and have a few extra glasses of wine at night with my husband and just sit and enjoy the company than go, oh no, I have to go to bed at 10 a.m. because I'm waking up at 5 a.m. to do my yoga practice. That's not going to give me the benefit that sitting and enjoying time with my loved ones is, so I think that it's, I come back to this, finding that harmony, because it doesn't have to be so regimented. You don't have to do things at the exact same time every day. And, I know I see all these things on the internet. It's like, wake up at 4, do this, schedule everything down to a T. And I mean, maybe that works for some people. For me personally, that doesn't work. I'm happy just to kind of slot things in where I can. And being that I have 4 children, I try to get them involved as well. So if they see me doing yoga at home, they'll come and join me. And if that messes up my practice, then who cares? At least I'm then enjoying having that time with my children, and they're seeing me as an example doing something positive, and they know that they can then join in. So it's that harmony in the balance and finding what you can do that sort of slots in. And I think that's really important, that we don't just jump in, with too much to do all at once. It's really lovely for someone like me who lives in this yoga world and go, well, you should meditate twice a day for 20 minutes, and then you should do a yoga practice for, 45 to 90 minutes every single day. And then you should eat vegan, and you should only eat, at whatever time when the moon is in, when the moon is waning and the planets aren't in retrograde and the star, like, come on, let's live in the real world where all that stuff is wonderful. But for a real person in a real, say, corporate job or just a real job, it doesn't work. So, take the things that you can do, start off slowly and go from there, because otherwise it has the same effect of just working too much. You just won't work.
Yeah. And then it's actually, it becomes part of the problem instead of part of the solution. And that's been probably the biggest and most helpful realization I've kind of just been slowly coming to, probably over the past 2 years, is like expanding the definition of meditation or mindfulness. And where, I used to think, okay, it is actually like sitting and, I've got my palms up and I'm trying to do a breathing exercise, or I'm trying to do the whole thing that you see that we all think of when we say meditation. And that was easier to fit in on a regular basis a couple years ago when I was single and I lived alone and I had a corporate job with a secure financial salary. Like, it was just a different phase of life. And again, like, I don't have children, so I don't have to manage, that many lives, but my life looks different now. And so I went from having this like great self-care routine to then feeling guilty and stressed trying to fit all that into a totally different season of life. And now I'm at the point where I view it more as like, if I just have one of those moments where I recognize I'm rattled and I come back into the present moment, and maybe I just take a deep breath. Earlier today, I went and just walked to take the trash out because that forced me to like get outside, get away from my computer, leave my phone. It's like those tiny, very short
Mm.
moments are what I consider my like mindfulness practice right now. And looking at that on paper, you could be like, that's nothing. That's like, 4 seconds throughout the day. But what I've decided, like, that's what I can do right now. And then I feel really good when I do it. And I'm just accepting that. And like, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean that's the key, and you hit the nail on the head, because mindfulness and taking time for self-care doesn't have to be going to the gym, going to a yoga studio, doing a 20-minute meditation. It doesn't have to be those things. And like you said, it can just be a simple thing of getting up, walking outside, walking out of the house, taking the trash to the cans. It doesn't have to be this big thing. And I think that's where a lot of people can get really confused and bogged down by, because people think, oh, well, I have to wear the Lululemon, and I have to go to the yoga studio, and I have to. No, you don't. You can do what you need to. I mean, for me, sometimes like I have a dog as well, and it's nice just to walk the dog to the corner. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't have time to walk the poor dog around the block. I walk her to the corner, and I just stand there with her and watch the dog, do her thing. And I just, it's nice to just stand there and go, I have nothing to do right now except just nothing, walk the dog to the corner. And then I go back inside, and that can be a reset. And, it's simple things: turn off the phone, go for a walk around the block if you can, do some star jumps in your lounge room. It doesn't matter. Take some deep breath. It's these little tiny things that we can do that we know help us, but sometimes we just fail to do them because we think that we should be doing more. Start small. Start with just some deep breaths. I mean, I have a smartwatch, and I have these notifications on my smartwatch that tell me to breathe. And throughout the day, I get these little pop-ups, my wrist vibrates. It's like, don't forget to breathe. And I go, oh yeah, thanks. But I work in this space, and I'm guilty of it as well, because if I don't then stop and take 5 minutes, which is nothing in the grand scheme of how many hours we have a day, 5 minutes to just sit and take some deep breaths, and then you feel better. So do the things that make you feel good. Do the things that make you feel better, and then just gradually go from there. Because if you start off, going from maybe not doing anything to then trying to commit to going and doing the big things that take up big chunks of time, inevitably you fall off that wagon and you don't maintain it. So if you can start small and do little things, and eventually be like, oh, this feels really good, I'll do more of this. That only took 5 minutes and I'm just sitting on my lounge, So do the things that make you feel good, so that you can then be better as a whole.
Yeah, I think it is like that, appreciating and seeing the value in the small things instead of comparing them to bigger things we could or maybe feel like we should be doing. Like, so, you walk your dog to the corner instead of sitting there being like, oh man, like I can't even walk this dog around the block. Well, it's more like, okay, I have this moment. I've walked the dog to the corner and it makes me feel good. I got outside. It's a moment away from my technology. Good. Like, that's good. Like, I feel like that's the healing in it. It
Mm.
isn't necessarily whether you walked to the corner or you walked around the block. It's like that mental break and then that appreciation for doing that small thing for yourself. I
Mm.
think that's where like the true value lies.
100%. And, it's really, I mean, I'm guilty of it. It's really interesting to the difference between, say, sitting on your phone and getting lost on social media, and then before you know it, you're down some rabbit hole and you're knee deep in someone's uncle's dog's cousin's next door neighbor.
Mm.
And, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I've been sitting here for an hour. Whoops. There's a huge difference between doing that, which is mindlessness, and doing something mindful, where you actively go, I'm just going to leave my phone in the house for a minute, or I'm going to put my phone on do not disturb, or just turn the bloody thing off and just go and take some breaths and doing something for self, as opposed to getting lost mindlessly into something else. And I think that's where we can see that value. And one of the things that I like to say in the yoga studios, we can't all be Instagram yogis, because it can be really intimidating to look on social media and you see all these perfect pictures with filters and outfits and Photoshop, and to the normal person these look like these really idealistic images of, oh wow, I really want to aspire to that. But that's not reality. People don't look like that. There's so much effort that goes into most of these photographs that it's just not real. So, coming back to this idea that we just be normal, just be you, and start with you and do something that's good for you. And social media can be great, but it also can be very detrimental for mental health. So, do things that are easy. And if that means just taking out the trash and taking some, maybe not deep breaths while you're doing that, but, breathing outside, not trash air, but, just
Yeah.
taking deep breaths is going to make a huge difference. And even, little things like sighing when you exhale, gosh, we feel so much better, big breath in and then go, it just lets the extra air out. And just that act of breathing helps, with
Oh,
so
for
much.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think for the most of the time we're breathing very like shallowly, and then we're not even, I mean, it's a total like subconscious thing. We're not aware of it. So just even that moment of like consciously taking a big breath can really, at least I found, can really like just ground me and make me feel less stressed. And I've started doing this thing. I'm reading a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, and he talks about this one little thing, and um it's like a little mantra, it's a little breathing exercise mantra. And he's like, just say, breathing in, I relax my body. Breathing out, I smile. And then it's like, dwelling in this present moment, I know this is a wonderful moment. There was something about that I just loved. And so that's now become my little mantra thing I'll do. Like whenever I think about it, I'm driving, I
Mm,
take a pause from work, and it is, it's so helpful for the deep breath and the intentionally relaxing, but then also that reminder of, okay, like this actually is a wonderful moment, because I'm alive, I'm here, I've got a roof over my head, or I'm outside, or whatever it may be. So I think that those like little simple things that even just remind you to take a deep breath,
mm.
like there's a ton of value just in that.
That's it. And that's what I mean by start small, because it doesn't have to be these big things. When I teach my classes in the last couple of years, I I make people close their eyes, which can be super confronting for people, because when you go to a yoga studio, everyone has their eyes open and everyone's sort of looking to see what the person next to them's doing. And, everyone wants to look the best. And it can get very, um, it can just get a bit intimidating. And even for me, as someone who's been practicing yoga for over 20 years, like I go to these big studios and I think, oh my gosh, I don't like, oh, I'm not good enough. And that's what can be really detrimental in these modern yoga studios. So I make people close their eyes, and it's fascinating to watch people move their bodies with their eyes closed, because they go from sort of all looking the same to there then suddenly becomes this freedom in their expression, in their movement. And these little things can be really encouraging. So the way that I teach is I get them to close their eyes, And then, I'll get them into some poses, which might be a little bit, trying. And I say, everyone just smile with the breath. And
Mm-hmm.
you see these people who might have been really tense trying to hold a pose, and then their body just relaxes, and then they start to enjoy it more. And I tell, I jokingly say to people, your homework for this week is to just breathe with your eyes closed, or your homework is just to remember to smile. And I had a student recently say to me, she's like, every time I come to your class, which might only be once every 2 weeks, she says, you say these really interesting little things, and you give us these homework tasks. And she goes, and I do them. She goes, I go into the world, and I remember to smile, or I remember to take a deep breath, and I remember to to sigh when I exhale. She goes, I feel just better because just doing these things. And and I have these little chuckles, and I say, well, that's amazing. That's my job is done. My role is to touch as many people with the magic of yoga. And I use the word yoga really broadly in this sense, is so that people can just be the best that they can be, mentally and physically in their bodies. So if that means, or if my job today is just to tell you to remember to smile, and that works for you, then fantastic, because those little positive things of smiling and breathing bring you back into that sense of balance and harmony in your body, so that you can just feel better. Because we can easily go on these paths of stress and anxiety and the hard stuff, and it becomes really overwhelming. And then if you just stop for a moment and take a few breaths and maybe smile, you'll realize that, oh, okay, hold on, what am I doing? And you come back into that sense of self and purpose. And that's what it's about. And it doesn't have to be big. It can just be a smile. It can just be walking outside. It doesn't have to be these big grand things.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I want to ask you about yoga though, because I'm totally one of those people you described, that I see the stuff on Instagram, or, I drive by a yoga studio and I think to myself, God, I really wish I had a yoga practice. I have not had a consistent yoga practice since I was in high school.
Mm.
And I had somebody message me on social media the other day asking like if I have a yoga practice. And I said no. And, she kind of asked why. And I'm like, I don't have time. And then I didn't say that because I'm like, if I'm saying I don't have time, I'm probably just not actually making it a priority. But I think it comes down to what we've been talking about, that I'm defining it as it's got to be this,
Mm.
hour-long session that I do at a studio, or I go do down in my garage and I try and heat it up or have the lighting or whatever, like
Mhm.
make it this thing. So like, and you've mentioned like taking a deep breath and smiling, but like, are there other ways that we can easily and quickly incorporate some yoga in our lives?
Totally. And to your point, this is when people start to overthink it. Like, oh, it has to be the right temperature. I have to do it in the right space. I have to have the right equipment. I have to wear the right clothes. Like, come on, just do something. Just move your body. And one of the easiest ways to do that is, a sun salutation. And that's in a regular vinyasa class, which is the popular yoga. It's a simple set of movements. It's usually between 8 and 10 movements. And that just done in the morning, because you're saluting the sun, but that just warms up your body and gets you moving. And it's a full body expression. Something like that can take 5 minutes, can take 10 minutes. You can do 108 of them and it can take you 2 hours. But for a regular person, just wake up, get out of bed, do some cat cows with your spine. And that might be all you need to do. When I teach prenatal yoga, we might only do, poses wise, we might only do 5 or 6 poses in that whole class. And the point of it, and I harp on about this to everyone that'll listen, is to feel good in your body. Do things that make you feel good. Don't do the things that don't. And that's a really simple statement. But if you look at your life and you look at things that you do day in, day out that don't make you feel good, but you keep doing them because you're just used to doing them, then look at why you're doing them and let them go. So it's the same in yoga. Do things that feel good. So if it feels good to wake up and do some cat cows and just, move your hips around and wiggle your bum a little bit and come into like a child's pose, and that's your yoga for the day, perfect. Job done. If you're wanting something a bit more dynamic, do, 3 to 5 rounds of a sun salutation A. That's going to warm you up and you'll be fine. job done, 5-10 minutes maximum. If you want more, go and do a whole thing and, just put your mat down or have no mat. Do it in your undies. It doesn't matter. Nobody's watching you at home. Well, maybe not. I don't know. But it doesn't have to be these big things. And I think that's where people, for the most part, it can just be too intimidating. And then they never start because they don't feel like they have the stuff or the space or whatever to do it, versus you actually don't. If you think of the history of yoga, it started with young boys in in India would do this to condition their bodies eventually for battle. So going back, 5,000 years, and it's now evolved, and the West has bastardized this idea of yoga into this, you have to look a certain way and you have to have a certain mat and you have to, come to these places. And I think, at the core of it, yoga is just helping your body and your mind to be the best you can. So come back to that and come back to moving to feel good. And, like I said, just move for a couple of minutes, take a few breaths. It's all you really need to do. And then if you, and I have a yoga studio. So of course, please come to the yoga studio. But it's one of these things that find a studio that feels right for you. And if every time you go into this studio or gym or anything, any place, if every time you go in, you feel like you're intimidated or you're not good enough, then that place probably isn't right for you, because then you're just going to continue with that and it's going to have this negative impact on you because it will just eat away in the back of your mind. If you walk into a place and it feels like you're home, or it feels like, this really nice sense of belonging and sense of community, or depending what it is that you're looking for, then keep going there. And who cares if it's not the popular place? Who cares if it looks a bit dingy? Or who cares if it, if it doesn't have all the right reviews on the internet? I mean, go somewhere that makes you feel good and just keep doing the feel good stuff. But be mindful that you're not in a cult as well, because, that's a real thing. So that's a joke. But, I just do find the places that make you feel good and just do more of that, because then your body will start to recognize and your mind will start to connect with that, and you'll just feel better. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I'm thinking, okay, I get up in the morning and I usually first thing I do is turn the coffee on. And so I could 100% do some cat cows or some sun salutations. And then it's like, and I've had this idea before, yet I haven't done it. So I guess it's a matter of, I don't know what it's a matter of. Maybe it's just a matter of remembering to do it or making it a priority, because I think for a lot of people, we have these ideas of things we want to do. And even then there's small things that we want to fit in, yet we still struggle to do it for some reason, which I don't know why that is. And it might just be that implementing any kind of new thing is a process, and first comes awareness, and maybe you sit in the awareness of wanting to do something for however long until you actually do it. But I'm really going to do it tomorrow morning. I'm looking at the exact spot I'm going to do it. I'm like, tomorrow morning when I wake up while my coffee is brewing. Salutations.
Well, I think the thing is that we have these ideas of, I have to do it in the morning, or I have to do it while this is happening, or I have to wait until I buy the DVD, or I have to wait till I subscribe to the thing or buy the clothes or whatever. Like, you could literally just put, obviously not right now because we're talking, but you could stop after this and just do it. It doesn't have to be at a certain time. We say sun salutations in the morning because you're saluting the sun, but if you do them at night before you go to bed, you might just be a bit energized. But you can do these things at any time of the day. It doesn't matter. I mean, I know, like, I've had a few late nights where I've been up writing content for some courses that I'm doing, and it's before I know it, it's 1 a.m. and I sit there and I go, oh my gosh, I'm so stiff. But I get up and I just move my body and I do some yoga and I do some cat cows, and it's 1 a.m. or 1:30 or whatever time. It doesn't matter. If you feel like you have the space to do it right then for 5 minutes, just do it, and like the meditation, do it in the car, do it in the shower, sit in the bottom of the shower and meditate while the water's running over you. That's beautiful. You've got 10 minutes, or, do these things, find find a moment, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be Instagram worthy. It just has to suit you in that moment, because nobody's watching you. No one's going to document it on social media. And in all honesty, no one else really cares. So, do what feels good for you when you can, and if that means doing it after you've brewed your coffee, who cares? You're still doing it.
You're right. Like, look, I just did exactly what we're talking about. Like, I immediately tried to put it into this process routine that makes sense to me. And I guess it comes down to like just removing all the parameters and the definitions of what we think it should look like and just figure out what works for us.
Totally. And that's why I say, do it in your undies. Do it when you've just woken up. Do it when, do it when you can, because it doesn't matter.
Just like when you think about it.
Yeah. Like you can sit, like I'm sitting in my car right now and you can sit and stretch your arms while you're sitting. If you're sitting in traffic, do some nice little movements with your wrists and your arms, move your neck around, all these little things that we don't do because we just sit there because, we might be in traffic or we're, whatever it is. And we make these excuses. So let them go and just do, as opposed to think about it.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this and for being so honest about the struggles of juggling everything. I think that's something that can really help change the messaging and the rhetoric that like, oh, like you can do it all, when the more people are like, actually, like it's really hard and maybe you can't. And you just find what works for you. Like I think it's really important for people to be honest about that and to put that out there so that other people who are struggling know that they're not alone, and stop trying to live up to some unrealistic, unnecessary expectation that exists for whoever knows why. Tell everybody where they can find more about you and the yoga studio and follow you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So my yoga studio is Sydney Yoga Collective, and we're in Sydney, Australia. So if you come to Sydney, come and see us. Otherwise, we have an amazing on-demand library of all our classes, which is fantastic. And it's yoga for real people, taught by real people. So that's really nice. And then you can find me on Instagram at the Sydney Yogi. And launching at the end of this month will be a new venture, which is called the Prenatal Yoga Studio. So for all the expecting mamas out there, a really nice place where we can just do some yoga to feel good in the body and without all the fuss, and maybe not too much hippy dippy, just some nice general stuff to help you feel good. So that's where you can find.
Very cool. Will that be virtual, like online as well?
100% virtual. So it'll all be videos. Yeah, there'll be a video for each week of your pregnancy and then beyond as well. So some post-pregnancy stuff in there as well. And given that I've had 4 kids, I like to think I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, probably.
So, it comes back to my whole ethos of, move to feel good in your body. Do the things that feel good. Don't do the things that don't. So join me on the screen on some way and we can move to feel good.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Casey. It's been fantastic.
Okay, that does it for this week. Thank you again so much for listening. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast if you are not already. Please take 2 seconds to leave a rating and review for the podcast if you haven't already. That means a lot to me, makes my day, also helps a lot with the podcasting algorithms. Make sure you're also following us on the socials. We are on Instagram and Facebook at The Better You Podcast. And what else? Let's see. I'm going into planning mode for 2021. So if you have guest or topic suggestions, feel free to reach out to me. I love to hear from you guys in terms of what you want to hear, like who you'd like to have on the show. So just shoot me an email at thebetteryouPodcast@gmail.com, or you can message me through the socials, whatever. However you want to get in touch with me, go for it. I'd love to hear from you. All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week.